Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules YouTube channel. This is going to be a video of our 2024 ladder prediction. At the moment, post round 15, we'll be running through all the games on the AFL website ladder predictor thing that they have on there. We're going to be using that to run through all the matches and see what we think the ladder will be. We're going to try and rush through this, keep it to about a 10-minute video, hopefully. So we'll jump straight into it. But before we do, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And check out all my socials. I'm on all the main platforms at All Aussie Rules. So go check all of them out. Also, just a side note, we aren't necessarily using the tips that I would select. I used a little bit of a a little bit of a game predictor model that has chucked out all these results. So I'm going to tidy it up over the next coming weeks, and we'll do another video and we'll see how this one goes, and we'll continue to see how it goes over throughout the rest of the year. But first up, this round 16, coming up this weekend. We've got Brisbane beating Melbourne over at the Gabba, so shouldn't be too much of a big surprise there. We've got North Melbourne hosting the Bulldogs. Bulldogs should win that one. Sydney should beat the Dockers. Collingwood up on the Gold Coast. Might be an upset, might not be. It's pretty level peggings at the moment in that one, odds-wise. GWS to beat Adelaide. Essendon to beat the Cats. Port Adelaide to beat St Kilda. Carlton to beat Richmond. And Hawthorn to beat West Coast. That will take us to the ladder after this round. I'm not going to go through it all every single week, but as you can see, Brisbane jumping into the 8. Other than that, big wins for GWS. Port Adelaide. Bulldogs also a big win. Geelong falling out of the 8. Melbourne falling back a bit. Hawthorn equal up with them, but still a little bit to go. Gold Coast struggling if they lose this weekend. Next weekend, this will be round 17. Collingwood to beat Essendon on Friday night. Then the Suns to win their first away game of the year against North Melbourne. Bulldogs to beat Port Adelaide. Hawthorn to beat Geelong in what potentially is an upset. GWS to beat Carlton. Fremantle to beat Richmond. Melbourne to beat the Eagles. Sydney to beat St Kilda. And Brisbane to knock off Adelaide. Also worth noting, I have gone in and changed margins for all of these matches. We're not going to look at them here, but just know that based on my model, whether it was a big win or a little win, we adjusted it for that. So the ladder after round 17, Sydney still on top. Collingwood jump above Essendon thanks to their win over them. GWS are sitting 5th. Brisbane up into 6th. Fremantle sitting 7. Bulldogs into the 8. Port Adelaide drop out of the 8. Other than that, nothing too special. Geelong a game and percentage outside of the 8 at this point. Hawthorn equal with on wins with the 8, just below on percentage. The following week, we've got Friday night footy. Collingwood to beat Geelong. We have Fremantle to beat Hawthorn down at Utah Stadium. Bit of an upset, that one. I reckon Hawthorn will go in as favourites there. Sydney to beat North Melbourne. Bulldogs in a surprise, sort of, to beat Carlton, I think, at Marvel Stadium. That plays into the Doggies' hands. Adelaide to beat St Kilda. The Bombers to knock off the Demons. Gold Coast beating Port Adelaide up on the Gold Coast. GWS beating Richmond. And the final game of the week, Brisbane knocking off the Eagles. That has us sitting with Carlton dropping to 4th, Collingwood up to 2nd, Essendon 3rd, GWS sitting 5th, Brisbane 6th and a potential home final, Fremantle 7, Bulldogs 8, Gold Coast back up into 9th, but as you can see, they are 2.5 games. No, they're not. They're only half a game. No, one full game, sorry. One game and percentage outside the 8. I've lost the plot. I can't read. Port Adelaide 10, Melbourne. Hawthorn loss hurts them a little bit there, but they're still 12th. Geelong, Adelaide, St Kilda, and then the bottom 3. The following round, Essendon to beat Adelaide on Friday night at Marvel Stadium. St Kilda to knock off the Eagles in Melbourne. GWS to knock off the Suns. Hawthorn to beat Collingwood in what is probably an upset. Collingwood obviously had won a few in a row on my predictor, but Hawthorn to get them here. Bulldogs to go down to the Cattery and get the win, which pretty much probably writes off Geelong's season then and there. Port Adelaide to beat Richmond. Brisbane to be the first ones to knock off Sydney since round 3 up at the Gabba. Fremantle to beat Melbourne, and Carlton to round out the round against North Melbourne with a win. So Sydney obviously got a loss, but they're still comfortably way out in front. Essendon jump in second, Carlton third. Loss to Collingwood drops them down to fifth with GWS taking over. Brisbane stay in 6th, Fremantle 7, Bulldogs 8. Port Adelaide a game and percentage outside the 8 in 9th. Same for Hawthorn. Now we're getting into the business time of the season, and we've got Carlton beating Port Adelaide on Friday night. We've got Geelong to knock off the Kangaroos on Saturday, as well as Essendon beating St Kilda. Brisbane to beat the Gold Coast, GWS to beat Melbourne, Fremantle to win the derby against the Eagles, Collingwood to beat Richmond, Sydney to knock off the Doggies, and Hawthorn to round out the round with a win over the Crows. Sydney staying on top comfortably. That won't change from this position with 4 rounds to go. Essendon sitting second, Carlton third, GWS 4, Collingwood 5, Brisbane 6, Fremantle 7, Bulldogs 8, Hawthorn just percentage outside the 8, and then you drop back a game to Port Adelaide, 2 games to Gold Coast, and Geelong and Melbourne. The following round, 2 Friday night games this week. We've got Bulldogs to beat Melbourne and a Gold Coast to knock off the West Coast over in the West. Richmond to beat North Melbourne, Geelong to beat Adelaide, Carlton to knock off Collingwood, Sydney to get another win against the Power, GWS to beat Hawthorn, Fremantle to win in Melbourne against Essendon, which is an upset and probably won't actually happen, but that's what the model said, so I went with it. Brisbane to knock off St Kilda. So not too many changes in the ladder here. The main ones being Essendon and Collingwood dropping down to 6 and 7 respectively. And other than that, Brisbane into the top 4, GWS move into 3rd. Hawthorn still move up into 9th, Gold Coast 10, Port Adelaide, Geelong. Still technically with a chance of making finals from this position, but it's starting to melt into an 8 and then bottom 10. Worth noting that these results are not ever going to happen, but this is just a prediction. Don't forget that. Sydney to beat Collingwood on the Friday night. Brisbane to knock off GWS. West Coast to beat North Melbourne in Melbourne. Freo to beat Geelong. Essendon to beat Gold Coast. Port Adelaide to knock off Melbourne. Carlton to beat Hawthorn. St Kilda to beat Richmond. And the Doggies to beat Adelaide. So with a couple games to go, Sydney have sewn up the minor premiership. Carlton looking pretty safe in the top 4, they're second. Brisbane, Fremantle jump into 4th. Essendon 5th. GWS have dropped down to 6th after being in the top 4 the week before. Bulldogs move up to 7, and the Collingwood Magpies, don't know what I was about to call them, but it wasn't that. They drop down to 8th on the ladder. They're still 2 games clear of Port Adelaide with 2 games to play, so you think they're pretty safe, but still potentially is a chance for Port Adelaide to make finals. Round 23, we got Sydney beating Essendon on the Friday night at Marvel, Gold Coast to knock off Melbourne, Freo to beat GWS, Brisbane to knock off Collingwood in Melbourne, Port Adelaide to beat Adelaide, St Kilda to beat Geelong, Bulldogs to beat North Melbourne, Hawthorn to beat Richmond, and Carlton to round out the week against West Coast with a win. That has Sydney on top, Carlton second, Brisbane sitting 3rd and looking pretty good for a top 4 spot. Freo 4th, Essendon 5, Bulldogs 6, GWS 7, Collingwood 8. Port Adelaide still with a chance of finals thanks to a win for them and a loss to Collingwood. And Hawthorn would need a miracle with their percentage. Final round of the year. Obviously, this isn't in order because we don't know what time or what days the games are played. But first up, Brisbane to beat Essendon. Carlton beat St Kilda. Geelong to beat West Coast. Hawthorn to knock off North Melbourne. Collingwood will get the win over Melbourne. Gold Coast over Richmond. Bulldogs to beat GWS. Sydney to beat Adelaide. And the final game is Port Adelaide beating Freo over there, which is a little bit of a surprise, but you never know. Strange things happen. Which leaves us with our final ladder. After 24 rounds, 23 matches for everyone. Sydney clearly out on top. Carlton second. Brisbane third. Fremantle sneak into the top 4. Bulldogs just missing top 4 in 5th. Essendon 6. GWS 7. Collingwood 8. Then a game and slight percentage behind is Port Adelaide in 9. Hawthorn just percentage behind Port Adelaide in 10. Gold Coast another game back in 11. Geelong a game behind Gold Coast in 12th. Melbourne 2 games behind Geelong in 13th. St Kilda 14th a game back. Then 2.5 games down to Melbourne. A game back to the Eagles. A game and a half, to the Eagles. And then another game to Richmond and 2 games ahead of North Melbourne. Obviously, that is not how the ladder's going to finish. That is just a prediction. Just on the model that I had. But I do think that will be the top 8. I don't think it will probably be in that order if I was to do the matches. I would say definitely Sydney. I would say Carlton, Brisbane, Essendon and Collingwood fighting out for the rest of the top 4 spots. I think Bulldogs probably just missed top 4. GWS probably 7 or 8. Fremantle is in there as well. So that's my thoughts. But this is the model. This is what we're sticking with. It gives a good idea either way of who's playing who coming home. And just for a little bit of a look, we'll have a look at the final series. So week 1, Sydney would be playing Fremantle at the SCG. I'll be backing Sydney in that. In an elimination final, Bulldogs Collingwood, they'll be at the MCG, and I'm going with Collingwood in that. Essendon GWS in the other elimination final at the MCG, the Bombers. And then the other qualifying final, Carlton Brisbane at the MCG, and I've got Carlton getting that one. So week 2 would be Fremantle hosting Collingwood, Freo Dockers to win, and Brisbane hosting the Bombers at the Gabba, and I've got Brisbane winning that one. Prelim final week, we've got Sydney at the SCG hosting Brisbane. Sydney should win that. Carlton at the MCG over Fremantle, which would leave a grand final of Sydney v Carlton at the MCG. I've gone Sydney, but that's just what we got. So that's 2024 ladder predictor as of today on the 25th of June after round 15. Let me know in the comments what you think of the ladder, who you think should be in the 8 or will come in the top 8 that I didn't have. Yeah, let me know what you think. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. We kept it quick, we kept it short, just about a 14-minute video. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the rest of my content. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube, there's stuff on Spotify, there's plenty of stuff on the socials. Go check it all out. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch us on the next one.